Good afternoon, bookworms and flyleafs. Welcome to this week's episode of Fae News. Excuse me. Here on Fae Productions. I'm trying to type one thing and talk to you guys and do another thing. First things first, of course, before we get started with today's show, please like, subscribe, and hold the share button. You will understand, of course, when we get into our reading today, as it always goes, right? Also, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsors, which you guys all know and you all love. It is the LARP Faeries. Yay, the LARP Faeries. So you guys have probably seen them here on our show actually a few times, to be perfectly honest. They are from the Southeast United States, and the LARP Faeries, they are two magical beings. They make crochet goodies and go on magical adventures. They offer their crochet goodies in their Etsy store, but you can also find them in our Discord, often in our fairy market. Many of their items are geared more towards LARP, which is live action role play, and geek/nerd culture. They offer free shipping on all orders of $35 or more. And they do travel a lot for their job during non-COVID times. So explore the natural world with them, around them. They actually have a beautiful home that they live in with lots of nature around it. And so they look forward to you guys joining them on their adventure. All of their links are in the low bar, and they just came out with a super cute coffee themed hat today. So that was a pretty, well, being a coffee lover, so I might be biased just slightly, but please go check them out, give them the likes and the subscribes and loves and all of such things. And with that said, welcome to today's author, who is Tessonja Odette.
Hi.
Hi, Tessonja. If you will just introduce yourself to everybody and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write, and give any shout outs if you have anybody you want to shout out.
Okay. Well, I'm Tessonja Odette, and I write, it's in the realm of upper YA or new adult. Some are straddling the line there of fantasy romance. I'm currently writing a series of fairy tale retellings, and my series are set in this realm called Fairwave, which is a Fae realm inspired, and it's the time period is inspired by the Victorian/Edwardian era. And there's Fae always in my books. But my current fairy tale retellings, I'm finishing up a Little Mermaid retelling called Kiss of the Selkie. But I also have Curse of the Wolf King, which is Beauty and the Beast. And after that, I did Heart of the Raven Prince, which is Cinderella. So right now I'm all in the fairy tale retelling world. That's like my brain space, and it's really fun.
That is fabulous, and you're near to me, so you are, yeah. So you're here in our beautiful Pacific Northwest, which is a pretty good setting for fairy. Is that where your books take place? Actually, is like in this greater, I guess, Washington area.
I'd say the Earthen Court would be close, because I have different courts in my my realm that I have. So I have it's an island, and it's called Fairwave, and there's 11 different courts. And I have seasonal courts, elemental courts, and celestial courts. And so the Earthen Court in my mind is as close to like Washington State as it gets, because I imagine it being lush and green and rainy. So
well, so tell me a little bit about this court system that you've devised for your books. How does that work? How do the fairies get into the courts, and et cetera, et cetera?
So let's see, it's kind of complicated, because I have Generation 1 and Generation 2. So the books I'm writing right now are in what I consider Generation 2. I wrote my original series that I started set in Fairwave is called the Fair Isle Trilogy. And that one, back then, the island is split where humans live on one half, there's a magical wall, and then the Fae live on the top half.
But if it's a magical wall, can the humans see it, or is it like an invisible magical wall and they just run into it and they don't understand why?
No, they can see it, and it's more of a wall in that you can cross it, but there is like magic between it. So you're not supposed to cross the wall, but it's more of like a magical barrier. So there could be people aren't supposed to cross it, but you can tell if a human has entered your territory if you're a fae.
Right.
So yeah, it's not exactly a tangible wall, and the wall remains in Generation 2, but it's now on the outside of the wall. And this time it is impenetrable. This time humans cannot go through the wall. And the wall is standing stones that has like magical vibrating in between them. So humans cannot penetrate it. So they would run into the wall. They would run into an invisible wall if they try to cross it, unless they're escorted by a fae of pure fae blood. So that I don't actually go into a ton of detail until the book that I'm writing now. So a lot of people haven't really gotten to see how that wall works, but they will in Kiss of the Selkie. But yeah, so in Generation 2, the perimeter walls all around the outside of the island, and it's keeping it very protected. So it's a very, that's the only place in this world that I've created where fae live, but there's also humans on this island. But yeah, the courts are split up, and it's generally types of fae that would be found in those courts. And even the seasonal and celestial courts, they still have an elemental affinity. So a lot of my magic, I'm messing up my microphone here. A lot of my magic is interwoven with elemental correspondences. So for example, like I have the earthen court, or not the earthen court, like the autumn court, that one's element would be earth. And then I have the wind court, that is there.
Wind and air. That makes sense.
That's the same thing. But spring. So spring would be what is the spring court? Am I forgetting my own courts because
it's possible you are on. You're like on. The pressure is on, right?
Let me look at my map over here. So like solar court, that's my celestial, and that would be equivalent to fire. There's a whole bunch, but apparently when I'm under pressure, I get nervous and I forget what my correspondences are. I have them all written down. My world building is complicated enough for me that I had to write it all down privately and on my website, so that if people really want to know these things that don't actually always matter to the books, but I'm like, they matter to me, I have to know. I have it on my website.
It is very organized of you, but I think that's what lends to the intricacy, right?
Yeah.
And it, not only that, the fae aren't supposed to be, they're not supposed to be just straightforward, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It sort of keeps it, keeps that mystery going on. Excuse me, I have a little cough. Okay, so today you're going to read from
Curse of the Wolf King. That's my Beauty and the Beast retelling.
Okay, your Beauty and the Beast retelling. And so just give us a little overview of this, and then we can get to the reading part.
Okay, so Curse of the Wolf King is about, so I have my classic Belle character. Her name is Gemma. Gemma Bellefleur, so that's where we get that little tiny Belle reference, is in her last name. And she is living in this town where she doesn't feel like she fits in. This is in my era that's kind of Victorian inspired. There's a lot of manners and propriety, and Gemma just doesn't feel like she fits in. She doesn't really like the expectations for women that they have to marry, and that's the only way that they can, make anything of themselves. She wants to be independent. So she has this whole scheme where she's going to try and get a job. And her dad's like, I'm going to disinherit you. And she's like, I'm going to get a job. I don't need you. And so she is seeking this job, and she gets this interview with this mysterious manor. And at this mysterious manor, she discovers a cursed a cursed king, who is actually tricking her and tried to get her there to hold her for ransom. So that's the setup of this whole thing, of the Beauty and the Beast, how Belle, the Belle character, ends up with the Beast character. But the thing that's a little bit different about mine is that he does try to hold her for ransom, and she's like, ha, 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 you're going to hold me for ransom? My dad doesn't even like me. He's not going to give you money. So there's that part where he captures her, but she's actually the one who bargains with him to let her stay. She's like, give me a job. You tricked me to get here by, putting this fake job job want ad out there. And so, no, you give me the job and I'll help you break your curse by tricking this girl who I don't like into falling in love with you. It'll be great. You'll break her heart. I don't like her. It's fine. No guilt. And she'll break your curse. So it's a little bit different from the classic Beauty and the Beast, where he takes her. She's his captive. No, she's like, no, I'm going to be at your house. Like, you don't have a choice. We're going to make a bargain.
I love this. Like, and I want to see that. I want to see that ad, right? Like,
Yeah.
maid wanted to clean castle.
Yeah. So she's like, oh yeah. She's like, I want that job. You're going to pay me. You're going to give me a lot of money, a lot more than what it sounded like you were going to give me. So yeah, that's the premise. Is she's actually going to try and help him in exchange for a job that's going to give her the independence she needs, so she doesn't have to just be this demure wife. She's going to help find a woman that she can trick into falling in love with him. And in this, to break the curse, someone has to be willing to sacrifice their greatest treasure. And that's why they think, well, we need someone to fall in love with you. Only someone dumb enough to trick, or only someone dumb would be. My words are garbled. Only someone in love would be dumb enough to give up their greatest treasure. That's Gemma's reasoning. So
right.
That's the setup of this book.
All right. Well, I'm excited to hear from it. So you guys, everybody watching at home, I'm about to turn over the entire screen to Tessonja and let her read. And then while she's reading, I'm going to be on mute and in the comments section with you, taking questions that we will pose to her when she is done reading. And when she is done reading and doing the questions, then we will have the drawing at the end of the show for a copy of this book. And today we are going to have some cool patron bonuses as well. So if you are on our Patreon, you will Patreon and or YouTube, you can hit the button right there to join the YouTube channel as well. You will get the cool little Patreon bonus that Tessonja is going to give to us. So with that said, are you ready to read?
Yes.
All right, my lady, here you go.
Okay, so I selected one of my favorite scenes from this book, and this is just after they've made their bargain that I've set up and told you about. And so she's trying to do her job, basically as the steward of his manor. She's in charge. She's head of all the maids and all the things, and she wants that money. But this is when they're early on in their interactions together. And I'll try not to garble my words. I'm pretty famous for garbling my words, so no promises there. All right. Oh, you're still here, comes the king's gruff voice. I turn and find him hovering in the doorway. I can leave, I say, preparing to rise from my chair at the bureau. He waves a dismissive hand and makes his way to his chair by the fire. Hunched to the side, he rests his head on his fist like I saw him do in the chair in my room. A lock of tangled hair falls over his eyes, but he doesn't bother pushing it away as he glares at the flames roaring in the hearth. Looking at him sitting like this, seeming so old, so worn, I can't help but think, is this planned madness? Is there anything in the world that can make this creature desirable to Imogen Coleman? His throne, I remind myself. He doesn't have to be handsome, gentle, or kind, so long as he has a kingdom and money. Imogen will be satisfied with that, I know it. But will it be enough to convince her to sacrifice her greatest treasure and break his curse? I shake my head. That's not for me to worry about right now. Besides, if my great scheme proves fruitless and the king's curse remains unbroken, I have every intention of benefiting from this arrangement, whether he lives or dies. Speaking of, I put my list aside and return to the ledgers. Then I make a tally estimating the cost to complete my proposed renovations, purchase the king a decent wardrobe, and hire staff. The sum is nothing better than a guess, and yet even if I were to double it, triple it, it would hardly put a dent in the king's wealth. I clenched my jaw, wishing I demanded a higher compensation from our bargain. How could he have dared complain about 20,000 quartz rounds when he has a fortune in the millions? I shake my head and hazard a glance at the king's chair. My heart leaps into my throat as I find his eyes locked on me, and he doesn't even flinch when I meet them. Heat burns my cheeks, my pulse roaring as I slam the ledger shut. You really shouldn't stare at a woman like that. He blinks a few times. I wasn't staring. You were. Averting his gaze, he returns to face the fire. Oh, and how should I look at a woman then? Not like their prey. I breathe in deeply to steady my nerves and slow my pulse. I'd say you'd scare dear Imogen off, but she is neither dear nor easily unsettled by the attention of men. She might find your inspection thrilling, but I do not. It's very canine of you. He shifts in his seat, muttering beneath his breath. Freezing, woman. I wasn't watching you like you were prey. Recovering my composure, I say, there are two ways I suggest you look at a woman from this point on, and it depends on how you'd like your persona to come across. My persona? Yes, think of it like a mask you must wear. In the same way you pretended to rescue me and then feigned injury, you'll need to pretend to be a gentleman around Miss Coleman. And to do it convincingly, you should craft a persona, the way you wish to be perceived by her. Like a glamour? I'm taken aback for a moment. I've heard about Fae glamours, but never considered if they were real. I suppose it's like a glamour. I imagine without your magic, you aren't able to produce one. He shakes his head. I cannot. My curiosity begs me to ask what a glamour is like, how one is created, what uses it has. But the mournful expression on the king's face has me returning quickly to our prior subject. For your outer persona, the two options I suggest you adopt are either the rogue or the stoic gentleman. What the freezing hell is a rogue? I pause, thinking back to my favorite novels. The Governess and the Rake comes to mind. It's a man who is a bit brash, bold, and charming, a little rough around the edges in terms of manners. He can be quite forward in his attentions and pushes the boundaries of propriety. This, I think, will naturally suit you in many ways. However, a rogue requires witty banter, flirtation, and charming conversation. He turns in his chair to face me. Are you suggesting I'm witless and without charm? I blush, realizing my insult too late. I know I should apologize, but the indignation in his tone has me wanting to laugh instead. Sealing my smile, behind pursed lips, I shake my head. I'm suggesting no such thing, only that I imagine you may not enjoy using your charm on a disgusting human. He straightens his posture. I'll have you know I'm a great actor. I say, tone flat. Anyhow, I suggest you consider the stoic gentleman. He has the benefit of being quiet and aloof, speaking only when he chooses, and coming across as confident and out of reach. Imogen will love the challenge of winning over such a man, and you will be able to, continue to do what you do. And what is it I do? Well, a moment ago you were brooding silently at the fire, which is suitable for the stoic gentleman. However, you must maintain better poise when in the company of our target, and you must behave with far more propriety to pull it off. He rolls his eyes and turns back to the fire. Propriety, my freezing foot. I leave my seat at the bureau and approach his chair with slow, hesitant steps, careful to keep my voice steady as I say, you'll need a haircut and new clothes, too. He all but leaps from his chair, rising on his staff to face me. You cannot take my hair. I pause, folding my hands at my waist. If I were to present you as the desirable, unseelie king of winter to a human prospect, you must look the part. He takes a step forward, eyes wide with something akin to fear. You will not present me as the unseelie king of winter. You will present me as no king at all. That wasn't part of our bargain. Well, it is now. I will have your promise or be done with you. No one will know that I am king. My entire scheme hinges upon you wooing her as king. He shakes his head. I forbid it. Why? I don't want anyone, neither human nor fae, knowing where to find me. I told you before, not many fae know about my curse, and humans are kept completely ignorant. They know they have an unseelie king, but not who I am, and the curse keeps them from thinking of me too long. This suits me well, for the unseelie ruler isn't required to interact with humans unless they choose to. That's how I want it to stay. I want no petitions coming my way, no human artisans seeking me as their patron, no fae begging for a place in my household. No one shall see that this. He purses his lips, leaving the remainder unsaid. It isn't hard to guess the rest, for it's written all over his face, that this is what I've been reduced to. This puts a huge wrench in my plans, but I can't say I don't understand. I know what it's like to try and keep others at arm's length, keep them from knowing who I truly am, who I truly was. It does spark a question, though. If the curse makes you easy to forget, how is it I haven't forgotten you? He waves a dismissive hand. You know about the curse now. It's the same as with the Fae. Those who know about it are less inclined to forget me, although my name is lost to all regardless. Can't you see how detrimental that could be? If too many people learn about my identity, my curse, my location, I'll lose all sense of privacy. Very well, I say with a sigh. However, this only makes the need to make you presentable far more important. I'm sorry, but your hair must be tamed. But it's all that keeps me warm. He brings a hand to the tangled golden brown tresses. I have no fur on this despicable body. That's what clothes are for. When I have your new wardrobe made, I'll make sure it's warm. He mutters a string of curses under his breath. Remind me why I'm letting a human girl make demands of me. I square my shoulders. Because we made a bargain and I'm basically your last hope. If this scheme of yours doesn't work, I'll have your head. I ignore that, keeping to myself the fact that if this doesn't work, he'll be dead. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Besides, if this doesn't work, I don't get paid. Silence falls between us, and I'm about to return to the bureau when he says, What will you do with the money? When the curse is broken and I hand over 20,000 quartz rounds, what do you plan to do with it? I consider lying for a moment, but settle on the simple truth. I want to go home. He furrows his brow. Home? To where I lived as a child, Isola. It's warm and beautiful country, one I was forced to leave when my mother died. The money will help me buy passage out of Faroe and perhaps purchase property in Isola. What will you do there? Have a farm like the one I lived on when I was little. Perhaps raise horses. Will you take your father, this Richard Bellefleur you so greedily stopped me from trying to con? My fingers clench in a fist at the mention of my father. No, he's the reason I seek financial independence. I will go to Isola alone. He studies me, eyes boring into mine, as if he seeks to see straight through them and into my thoughts. I give him a pointed look. This is what I mean about staring. He throws an arm in the air and turns around. Infernal human! No, it's good practice, I say gently. Here, let me explain how to amend the situation next time. Grinding his teeth, he turns back to face me. Amend the situation, he mocks under his breath. If you're caught staring by a woman, or you find your gaze locking with someone far longer than, say, 3 seconds, you have 2 options. If you play the stoic gentleman, you must turn away at once, show no embarrassment, but you may allow yourself to seem affected, disconcerted for merely a beat, as if you'd been captivated by her beauty but must turn away lest your stare burn her. Then go about your business, back to brooding and such. He shakes his head. This is stupid. The second option is the rogue. When the rogue stares at a woman, he need not look away at once, but he must turn the stare into something else. Not a bashful smile, but a devious hint that you know you've been caught staring and you like it. What is this devious hint supposed to look like? I shrug. A subtle smirk, perhaps. It must be convincing, though. It can't look like a sneer, and it must not be so obvious that everyone around you catches it too. Well, isn't that just as simple as a snowflake, he says, tone heavy with sarcasm. It's probably not as hard as you think. If you're so smart, why don't you show me yourself? I open my mouth, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. Well, I've never played the rogue before. Surely you've been played by one, at least. The statement strikes me like a blow to the chest. His words were said with no malice, no scorn. It was likely nothing more than a clever turn of phrase, but it is painfully true. Played by a rogue indeed. He must sense my shift in mood, for he lowers his voice, tone gentle. What I mean is, you must have seen this smirk in action before. I want to see it. I breathe away the memories that threaten to invade this moment, lock them back where they belong in the recesses of my mind. Oh, fine, I say. Now look away for a few seconds. When you meet my gaze, watch what I do. He does as told, rolling his eyes as he turns around, then slowly finds my gaze again. When our eyes meet, I allow them to lock. 1, 2, 3. Then, letting just a corner of my mouth lift, I slowly turn my head, breaking eye contact at the last second possible. I look around the room, then drop the act and return to face him. See? His expression is blank, eyes fixated on my lips. Then they slowly rise to meet mine, and once again he holds my gaze for far too long. I lift my brows as a silent cue, and he sighs, quirking his mouth in something that looks closer to a snarl than a smirk. He breaks eye contact and looks away. I'm forced to hide my laughter behind a cough. It needs practice, but you got my hint at least. For now, I suggest you play the stoic gentleman and simply look away. Can you care to leave my parlor yet? He says through his teeth. I will take my leave, I say, but first I want to call you something other than Your Majesty. Your Majesty will do. Good night. Come now, if I'm to hide from Imogen that you're the king, I can't introduce you as such. You need a proper name. One that makes you sound like a refined gentleman. I have a name, but you don't remember it. He stalks toward the hearth, pacing before it, brow wrinkled. I've tried so hard to recall it. Sometimes I think it's there, right on the edge of my mind. I almost hear it ringing in my ears, something like Floyd, Ferris, Varys, Elvis. I bark a laugh. Elvis? He growls and shakes his head. Freeze off. I'm sorry, I say, smothering my laughter. Can I give you a name then? I doubt you'll take no for an answer. That's true. I take a few steps, squinting at him while I try to find a name that matches his face. Not the wild mane of hair or frizzy beard, but the man beneath all that, the one with wine-colored eyes who likes to brood by the fire. Elliot Rochester, I finally say. What kind of name is that? Rochester is the name of my favorite brooding hero from one of my most beloved novels, The Governess and the Cursed Palace. And Elliot, well, Elliot just seems to suit you. He shuffles over to his chair and returns to his seat with a huff. Fine. I cross the parlor and stop at the door, looking back at him as he drapes a blanket over his lap and pulls his chair closer to the fire. With a memory of laughter still tingling my lips, I can't help but think that perhaps the Wolf King isn't the worst after all. Maybe he does have a chance at wooing Imogen Coleman. Good night, Elliot Rochester. It's your majesty, he grumbles. But as I enter the hall, I'm almost positive I hear him mutter, Good night, Gemma Bellefleur. That's the end of the selection that I chose.
All right. Well, we do have a couple of questions. Let me just bring us back together here. All right. So thank you so much for that lovely little reading. I was wondering when it all started, I was like, where is the fairy part gonna come into it? Because because I'm thinking, Beauty and the Beast mode. So I was like, well, how's that going to work? And I think you did a really clever job, actually, of coming up with a way to get that, to do that retelling, right? So, yes, thank you so much, Melissa, for saying so. All right, so we have, let's see. What is the most challenging part of retelling an older tale? And then followed by, how did you overcome those difficulties?
The biggest challenge, I think, is finding that balance between creating something new and original that's going to sound fun and exciting while also maintaining the things that people really, really love. And also, even though the tales are, the original tales are like, that's where this all started, there's also a lot of people, a lot of readers who are, their heart is wrapped around the Disney version. So there's also that to consider. Even though there are certain things in the Disney version that are not in the original story.
Like so many of the things?
So many of the things that people love. So Curse of the Wolf King was probably the one that I really had to select those things. Like, what are those things from the Disney tale that people love? Because honestly, that's probably, of all the retellings, that's probably the one that readers want to be as close to the Disney version. Just because there's like the library, people love the library, people love the certain like phrases, the whole like what's in the West Wing, like all these little itsy bitsy things that are just the ball gown. I mean, I do think people like the yellow ball gown. I didn't do yellow ball gown, but there's things like that.
How did you find this out? Did you do some kind of questioning of people to figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, I did. I have asked people like what their favorite parts about it is, but I also am friends with other writers, and another writer who has written Beauty and the Beast. So she was very helpful. It's Hannah Sandvig. She's written the fairy tale romance series. Her Beauty and the Beast is Rosegate, and so she did the research before I did. But she was very helpful to ask, like, what are the things, you've done this research already. What, in your opinion, are the things that people really like? So her research really helped. My research, I looked around as well. There's always a post somewhere that people are like, I want Beauty and the Beast retellings, but I want them to have this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, their note to myself. That's what people like. So yeah, a little bit of research and just kind of noticing. And also myself, like, I love certain things about Beauty and the Beast. So I had to keep the things that I personally really wanted. But at the same time, I really wanted to do something new. I also really wanted to improve on things that a lot of people didn't like. And that's one of my favorite things about doing retellings. One of the main things that people say that they don't like about Beauty and the Beast is the Stockholm Syndrome. Some people love it, but the majority of people do not really love that. And they say that it is hard to believe when they're reading it. It's just hard to really like suspend your disbelief that this person fell in love with their captor who's been like very evil to them, or that he has to have a strong enough reason to kidnap her and keep her. You know, there's just this combination of things. So that's why I decided that she wasn't going to be his captive. She was basically gonna like captive him, be like, no, you're gonna keep me at your house and deal with me. So that was fun to do. I really like taking those things where people are like, I wish this wasn't in that retelling. And I'm like, well, let me just do my own version there then. So yeah, that was kind of how I guess to answer the second part, I guess we pretty much already talked about, was just doing research and asking people and yeah, just trying to make sure that I'm making my readers happy while also my own inspiration and creativity and trying to make something unique and fun for me.
I find it interesting because while you were answering this, before we got to the whole Stockholm thing, I was sort of in my mind thinking about a similar thing, which is the old fairy tales. You know, a lot of times they were meant to be these lessons in things to not do, like don't go into the woods at night, kids, because you know we live in the 1300s and wolves will eat you.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So when you retell your stories, what do you think? Like, do you try to deliver a lesson? Are you just trying to tell a fun story? If you are trying to deliver something like that, what do you think the important modern takeaways are?
So I definitely still have some kind of overarching theme that's kind of like, I wouldn't say lesson, but it's very personal to the characters, and I feel like it does still fit into the world. I don't do, and also I write romances. Like mine are very romance focused, so a lot of it has to do with the romance, what they're going to learn about themselves and how they're going to grow from this love story. Particularly in Curse of the Wolf King, Gemma's lesson is that, and this is one of many different types of themes I explored in here, but her lesson was that originally she thought the only way that I can experience freedom is to not get married and to be financially independent. So she was like, love, because she had experienced a scandal, and she basically was shamed for creating a scandal. And so she was like, love equals bad. Like that equals me, you know, getting chastised by my dad and controlled. So her lesson was that she can be independent while also being in love. And she can, she doesn't have to be alone in order to feel free. So that was one of the things that I explored in that. And I also explored a lot of other things. Like, I love writing in an era influenced by the Victorian Edwardian era, but I also really like to explore feminine empowerment during that, because that is an era where feminism and female empowerment was pretty stifled, and I like to show thriving in those environments. So that's also that's a big theme in a lot of my books as well.
I like it. Okay, so let's see. We have, nope, we already did that one. Let's see. Are these fairy tales connected inside your world to bring them all together?
So this is another one of those kind of complicated questions. They are connected in that. So I have my two series. The first one is a trilogy called the Fair Isle trilogy, which is not a fairy tale series, but is connected to my fairy tale series, which is Entangled with Fae. And those individual books are all standalones, but they are also connected in that there are some crossover characters. I like to introduce my next main character in the previous book that I'm writing. So I like to have it be where if you read this one, you will meet some other people and then you can be like, oh, I like that person that I met. Oh, come to find out she has a book, so I'll go read about that girl over here. But none of them are, at least not in my Entangled with Fae, the fairy tale series, none of them are, you don't have to read them in order. There's not this like overarching villain, and that if you read it out of order, you're not going to get the whole story right. So they are connected in that they're in the same world. I have some crossover characters. They also are connected in the way that I have crossover characters from the Fair Isle trilogy come hang out. But
some
the cool thing is that
going on, right?
Like, yeah, there's a lot going on here. There's people that show up from the first series that are in this one, but I do like that I get to make these ones where even though they show up, I'm not putting them in there to be like, oh, but you have no idea what I'm talking about unless you read 3 books. I introduce them as like, it's more like an Easter egg. So if you did read those books, you're like, oh, I know that person. So yeah, they're connected in a complicated way, but not super necessary that you have to read all of them.
Well, so now I know that earlier you said, before we got to the reading, you were talking about how your world is quite complicated and therefore you have to map it all out for yourself.
Yes.
Is this actually kind of your whole writing style? Like, you're not a pants writer, a pantser, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain point, I am See, my writing style is like as complicated as this freaking world that I've made, because I do like if I need to write something about like I mentioned there's a ship, I'm like, I need to know how boats work and how they worked in like the turn of the century. I need to know what do they have knobs? Do they have do you push a button? Even if I'm maybe not even going to write about, I'm like, but I need to know, because if I say that this type of ship made a certain sound when it's like in the, going by, like it's not going to make sense if that was known to be a silent, it's like things people don't care about, but I'm like, I need to know. So that is also how I plan my world. If I have to mention something tiny, I'm like, but how does that work? Let's go back to the beginning. I'm going to write all this stuff. But then when it comes to my books, I do plot them out only to where my brain knows, but I don't force my brain to know more than it does, because I discover a lot when I'm writing. So I'm like right in the middle there. I plan way too much of things that like probably don't matter, but they matter to me and they make me comfortable to write.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's certain things like I usually only plot pretty thoroughly, like the first act of my book, then, half thoroughly to the midpoint. And then after that, I'm like, these things happen. I know they do. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to happen, but I'm sure they will. And that's when I start to discover things that changes how things go toward the end. And sometimes that is awesome, and sometimes that is stressful.
So, how many more books can we expect, if that's a thing you can reveal?
That's a hard question, because I had 2 more in mind that I wanted to write. And in writing this book, I've decided that the next one I was planning on writing and already introduced that main character in this book. I'm like, no, I'm actually going to do a different one. I think I'm going to do Snow White next. And like, darn it, I introduced my Sleeping Beauty character next. But I'm like, I'm a mood reader, and I think I'm also a little bit of a mood writer. I'm like, but I really want to write Snow White. So I definitely want to do Snow White and Sleeping Beauty. And then after that, like it's infinite. I don't have a set end to these, but I did focus my entire year on writing at least the 3 books in this series. But going forward, I will be probably splitting my attention with some other series, because I do want to explore some other books. But I do think this series is going to just keep going so long as there are fairy tales to be inspired by.
Fair enough. One last question, I think, and then while you are answering this last question, everybody, this will be the time to put your name into the comment section so that you can get your extra entry for the giveaway at the end of the show. And of course, if you're subscribed to our Patreon and or YouTube channels here, you will get an automatic entry as well. So let me find that last question. Here we go. So yes, now's the time. Put your name in the comments. The question is, it seems from the passage that the king is Fae. What are some of the ways that affects the behavior of the beast/king?
So Elliot Rochester, the main character in this, he's the unseelie king of the Winter Court, and he is Fae. He is, so without going into another complicated thing, which is my version of unseelie versus seelie, I guess I have to kind of explain it. One aspect of my world building is that the unseelie Fae is kind of Fae in their natural forms, or Fae in they're a little bit closer to like animal forms, like a kelpie, a mermaid, a siren, kind of those classic Fae. And the Seelie Fae are what I consider, they're in a humanoid form. So in some books you'll see they have high Fae and they have lesser Fae. I think in like Holly Black series she has high Fae, lesser Fae, which kind of breaks down to be like that. Like the humanoid Fae are what they call the high Fae. They're like the ruling class, and then all the other the animal more like creatures and brownies and sprites, those are all considered like lesser Fae. So instead I have that as my Seelie and Unseelie. But each Fae can shift between two forms. So they have an Unseelie form and they have a Seelie form. And that has nothing to do with whether, if you're the king, if you're the Unseelie king, you don't have to be stuck in your Unseelie form. But anyways, Elliot, his Unseelie form is a wolf. And he has been so anti-human this whole time that he will not shift into his Seelie form. So he has been in a wolf form his entire life until he was cursed for doing something very bad. And he was cursed to be in his Seelie form. So he basically looks like a human now, and he hates it so much. He hates humans and he doesn't like this human body. He wants to go back to a wolf. So yeah, that has definitely, that's kind of how that has affected him. He is very angry about having to be in this human body. As a wolf, as a wolf king, he just got to be a wolf. I mean, he still had fancy parties, but he did it with his wolf friends. And
did it with his wolfy friends. Yeah. Well, I have a catly friend that has just joined me here. So I guess that's a thing. All right, so today's drawing is going to be for a copy of this Curse of the Wolf King, a paperback copy. And I believe I've got everybody. So let me pull up our Wheel of Win. And you guys, there are going to be some Patreon bonuses after the show coming out for you. So here we go. This is our wheel. And I'll take that away. So between last night, what day are we on? We're on Friday. Between Wednesday and today, they've changed their platform. So here we go. It looks different, like different colors. Wheel looks different. Okay, here we go. Boom. And Jimmy Cafe are the winner. Congratulations. You get a copy of today's book. All right. Jimmy is one of our patrons out there. Out there in the eastern part of the state here. So that's very cool. I'm sure he will be happy for that. And with that said, I know you have to go a little early today because you have a thing to go do. Is there anything that you'd like to say to everybody before we let you go this afternoon?
Just thank you for joining me. I'm super awkward in front of the camera and when
great.
I have to talk out loud. So
you did great
for being here.
All right, you guys. And remember, please, if you make the purchases, to leave the reviews because those always help the indie authors quite a lot. All of Tessonja's information is, of course, in the low bar, as well as the ticker everywhere you're watching. These videos will stay up so you can come back anytime and get those. And I think with that said, then that brings us basically to the end of today's show. It's Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. And we will see you again on Wednesday, next Wednesday for Fae News. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Hello, friends. This is Gunther Hammerhands. Thank you for checking out Fairy Princess Lolly's channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. Use your troll hammer to ring that little bell icon to get notifications when she posts future videos. And if you'd like to support these magical creations, fly over to our Patreon and join the fairy family.